Before his passing, Mary's husband Arthur lied that a small box of gold was hidden in the house. Driven by the fight for the inheritance, their children and grandchildren tore the old house completely upside down searching for it. In the end, the siblings grew deeply suspicious of one another and cut off all contact. During the second year of visiting his grave, Mary overheard Emma, Arthur's first love and secret mistress, talking with her grandson. Standing in front of the tombstone, Emma spoke with utter satisfaction. "Oh, Arthur, thankfully you left all your assets to me. Our son just bought a massive villa in the city, and our grandson is about to study abroad. As for Mary and those lowly children she gave birth to, searching for that non-existent box of gold tore them apart in no time. Mary has aged nearly 20 years from the stress. Haha, Arthur, you always were the smart one. When you were alive, Mary kept us from being together, but in death, you made sure she and her kids would never have a moment of peace." After saying this, Emma gently stroked the tombstone. "In this life I couldn't have my name engraved on your headstone, but in the next life, we must stay together forever." Mary was so furious she almost coughed up blood, her head buzzing as if it were about to explode. Arthur and Emma actually had an illegitimate child together. And Arthur had cared about his reputation more than anything else in his life. Because of that, he had kept his affair with Emma completely watertight. It was only after his death that Mary finally learned the truth. He had given all his love and wealth to his mistress and her descendants, leaving only hatred and lies for Mary and her children. Murder only takes a single thrust of a knife. What gave Arthur the right to slaughter her heart like this? Filled with resentment, Mary returned to the old house. Looking at the traces of her existence in the home where she had spent her entire life, she felt that everything was utterly meaningless. She decisively messaged each of her children individually about everything that had happened that day. There was no point wondering why she didn't just send it to a family group chat. This family had been shattered the moment Arthur uttered that lie on his deathbed. Once it was all done, she was so exhausted that she fell asleep the moment her head hit the pillow. When she was awakened by a noise, she suddenly saw a familiar scene. Funeral flags were fluttering, people were wearing white mourning garments, and the funeral music blared with an unbearable, ear-piercing pitch. This was a mourning hall, but the portrait on the altar had been changed to hers. Mary had actually died. That was why she was able to return as a spirit on the 7th day after her passing to look at her children and grandchildren one last time. Her eldest son and his wife were both government officials. When Arthur passed away, they had insisted on keeping the arrangements simple. Yet Mary's funeral today was incredibly grand. Her second son and his wife were usually the type to penny pinch every cent, but right now, they were crying so hard they couldn't even breathe. Listening to her family talk, Mary finally understood. The moment they received her messages, they had rushed back to the old house, only to discover her ice-cold body. Her youngest, divorced daughter, who was supporting the grandchild Mary had raised with her own hands, stood in the middle of the mourning hall and spoke furiously. "The greatest tragedy is a broken spirit. I cannot let Mom leave us like this. That old man never did a single decent thing in his entire life. And even in death, he couldn't leave us siblings in peace." The second son gritted his teeth. "I'm going to the bank to find an investigator. A massive wire transfer like that couldn't have happened without leaving a paper trail. After that, we're hiring a lawyer. We absolutely have to take back the assets." The second daughter-in-law interjected. "But what if it was a cash gift, or there's a document proving it was a voluntary donation? This lawsuit will be incredibly hard to win." The second son's voice turned ice cold. "If we can't do this the legal way, we'll do it the dirty way. One way or another, I'm going to destroy them." "What do you say, big brother?" The eldest son and his wife exchanged a look and replied with just a few short words. "We destroy them. We absolutely have to." Mary let out a laugh. "Arthur, do you see this?" she thought. "My children didn't turn out the way you expected after all. You wanted to use a fake fortune to tear this family apart? Keep dreaming." Unfortunately, it was all too late. If she had known the truth back then and taken the children away from Arthur, would she and her kids have been spared all those years of suffering? When she opened her eyes again, Mary found herself lying on a bed, slowly regaining consciousness. "Welcome back. If you got a second chance after a toxic marriage, would you stay or completely flip the script?" Today's rebirth story is the ultimate mother's payback. Let's dive in. Her head felt incredibly heavy, her stomach ached with hunger, and her entire body was limp and drained of energy. The children stood around the bed, calling out to her like helpless little kittens. "Mommy? Sob? Mommy?" please wake up." As she opened her eyes completely, she saw her 3 tiny children, her eldest son, William, her second son, James, and her youngest daughter, Lily. Seeing her awake, William let out a sigh of relief. "Mom, you've been unconscious for a whole day and night. Dad still hasn't come back. Mom, does Dad not want us anymore?" Mary rubbed the swollen bump on her forehead, having absolutely no memory of what had just happened. The 2 younger children were just bawling their eyes out. Only William could speak somewhat clearly. Between his tears, he recounted everything that had occurred before she passed out. The previous afternoon, Arthur had returned home acting like a completely different person. He had frantically ransacked everything, stuffing all their savings books and food stamps into his bag, intending to take them all away. When Mary came home and saw this, she naturally refused to let him. The 2 of them got into a fierce argument. As a result, Arthur started spouting even more bizarre nonsense, claiming that she had ruined his entire life, that God had shown him mercy by letting him live again, and that he absolutely refused to miss his chance this time around. He even told her that she would have to figure out how to take care of the kids on her own. The little ones ran over to try and stop the fighting. During the struggle, Arthur found the kids to be a nuisance and violently kicked James and Lily aside. Heartbroken, Mary rushed over to embrace her children, only for him to shove her away forcefully. Her head smashed straight into the doorframe. Seeing her pass out, Arthur didn't even bother to help her. He simply hurried to gather all the valuables in the house and fled. William was too busy tending to his younger siblings to stop his father. For that entire day and night, the 3 children managed to drag and lift Mary onto the bed. They then sat vigil by her bedside, praying to God that she would wake up soon. Hearing this, Mary furrowed her brows deeply. Arthur had prioritized his reputation above all else for his entire life. When had he ever done something like this? There was only one possibility. Just like her, he also retained his memories from their past life. After dying, for some inexplicable reason, they had both been sent back to the 1980s. At this moment, 7-year-old William could only choke back his tears. "Mom, Dad really doesn't want us anymore." James was only 5, and Lily was even younger, just 3 years old. Mary grabbed the 2 younger ones by their hands and pulled them up, then shot a stern glare at William, making him fall completely silent. Just then, Lily's stomach let out a loud rumble. "Mommy, I'm hungry." The poor things had gone without food for a whole day and night. Mary fired up the stove and quickly cooked 3 simple bowls of plain noodles. The 2 little ones slurped theirs down eagerly, but William was so devastated that he couldn't even swallow. "Mom, if I had hugged Dad's legs tightly, would he have stayed with us?" William asked. Mary's head throbbed with a splitting pain. "Your father's legs belong to him. Even if he couldn't run away today, do you think he wouldn't just run away tomorrow?" William choked up, but Mary scolded him straightforwardly. "Your father has been gone for a day and a night. If I hadn't woken up, were the 3 of you planning to starve or cry yourselves to death? Didn't you know you could go outside and ask for help?" William sobbed, his face crumpling. "But Dad said we shouldn't let outsiders know about the bad things that happen in our house." Mary almost passed out from anger all over again. In their past life, Arthur's family had been wealthy landlords. Before the major reforms, half the real estate in the county had belonged to his family. His first love, Emma, came from an even more powerful background. Her family was involved in politics, and they even had relatives who had moved to the city to serve as generals. During those times, because of their unfavorable family backgrounds, both of them constantly faced hardships in their careers and daily lives. To make his life easier, Arthur had no choice but to break up with Emma and marry Mary, a daughter from a family that had been poor farmers for 3 generations. After they got married, Arthur always looked down on her. He complained that she was ignorant and petty, and that her words and actions were entirely unpresentable. Her family was indeed poor, but she had still graduated from middle school with a proper education. Not wanting to be looked down upon forever, she had studied hard to advance to a vocational high school. However, Arthur always claimed that the women in his family, even without degrees, possessed enough true knowledge to crush her completely. Knowing she couldn't win an argument about education with him, Mary poured all her energy into her daily life and work. After getting married, they had 3 children, and their peaceful, ordinary days were considered stable. Yet Arthur constantly loved to wallow in self-pity, complaining that even if a husband and wife got along perfectly, there would always be regrets in the end. With her educational level at the time, she genuinely couldn't understand what he was whining about all day long. In truth, Mary had also wanted to live a poetic life, but with the heavy burdens of survival, household chores, fieldwork, and raising children, she opened her eyes every morning to the harsh realities of food, clothing, and money. Where would she find the time to study poetry, music, or art? Still, she had felt that this era was stifling Arthur's spirit and talent, leaving him depressed and dissatisfied for half his life. Unconsciously, she and the children had centered their entire lives around his wishes, quietly obeying his every word. After all, wasn't it because the whole family had grown so accustomed to Arthur single-handedly oppressing their thoughts that they obeyed him so blindly? Otherwise, how could a single phrase like "bad things in the house shouldn't be known by outsiders" terrify William so much that he didn't dare go outside to seek help? Furious, Mary slammed her hand on the table. "What do you mean, bad things shouldn't be known by outsiders?" she thought. "The whole world needs to know. The entire village and neighborhood need to know." She looked at the 3 frail, pitiful children in front of her. Perhaps God had heard her desperate wish in the morning hall and sent her back to this exact moment so she could save herself and her children from hell with her own hands. The next day, she dropped the 2 younger children off at a neighbor's house, asking them to babysit. The neighborhood auntie leaned in secretively and said, "To be honest, I heard you guys arguing the other day, and the kids were crying too. But when I knocked on the door, William just cracked it open a tiny bit and said you were just sleeping, and his siblings were fine. Mary, are you and Arthur really okay?" When she said this, William was standing right beside Mary, his head bowed low. She suddenly recalled a strict habit in their household. Because Arthur's family had a landlord background, they had always lived a secluded life in the village. No matter how close their relatives or friends were, they never wanted to interact much. Even after marrying Arthur, she had to follow his family's rules. If someone visited during the day, they were absolutely not allowed inside. The door would only be opened a crack to speak and locked immediately afterward. Having lived 2 lives, she finally woke up and realized just how suffocating and isolated an environment Arthur had trapped her and the children in. The more she thought about it, the angrier she got. She decisively poured out everything, how Arthur had swept up all their money and food stamps, fled, and even physically abused her and the children. The auntie was utterly shocked hearing this. Has Arthur gone mad? He usually looks so refined. How could he do such a thing? Mary lifted the children's shirts to show her the dark bruises on James and Lily's stomachs. The 2 little ones were in so much pain, their eyes were red, yet they still tried their absolute best to hold back their tears. Seeing this, the auntie cursed at Arthur non-stop. William lowered his head again, blaming himself. "Mom, it's all my fault for not taking good care of my brother and sister." Suppressing her anger, Mary asked, "Are you the one who hit them? Why do you take the blame for everything? If you want to protect your younger siblings, what should you do from now on?" William remained perfectly silent. James let out a huff and declared, "Whoever dares to hit me, I'll hit them right back." Lily also babbled, "Bad Daddy hit us." Mary pulled the 2 little ones into her arms. Sure enough, only the ones who actually got kicked in the stomach truly knew how much it hurt. "William, didn't you want to go find your dad?" she asked. "I'll take you to the city to look for him right now." William's eyes instantly lit up with hope. In his heart, Arthur was still the knowledgeable, highly educated, and brilliant father he had always known. There are some things that, if not seen with one's own eyes, a person will never give up their illusions about. The neighborhood auntie pulled James and Lily into her arms and spoke with a strong sense of justice. "Mary, you absolutely cannot let him off the hook. At the very least, you have to get back your hard-earned money. Leave the 2 little ones with me. If Arthur comes back to the village first, I'll have my husband block him." Mary thanked her, then led William away to catch a bus to the city. William began to feel insecure again. "Mom, everyone knows what Dad did now. Will they look down on us from now on?" Mary replied firmly, "We aren't the ones who did something wrong, and we aren't the ones who lost face." Seeing him still looking sad, she continued, "When children do something wrong, they get punished. Your dad is an adult and an intellectual at that. He understands so many moral principles. Shouldn't he be punished even more severely?" William revealed a look of deep thought. After arriving in the city, Mary led William to a residential complex for middle school teachers. Standing outside the fence and looking into the small first-floor yard, she saw Arthur looking incredibly radiant, standing next to a beautiful woman in a dress. Beside them was a young boy, about 6 or 7 years old. The 3 of them were gathered around a round table in the garden, eating cake and drinking afternoon tea while laughing and chatting happily. The young boy giggled and turned his head. His face looked 70 to 80% identical to William's. This child was Arthur's illegitimate son with his first love. Mary's temples throbbed incessantly. William was stunned with horror. He clenched his little hands and clamped them hard over his mouth to keep from crying out loud. They hadn't watched for long before the little boy ran inside the house. Arthur's gaze was tender and lingering, while Emma smiled and spoke gently. The two of them put their arms around each other's shoulders, looking exactly like a deeply loving married couple. Emma asked, "Why did you come here? And you bought so many things, even that piano. What if my husband comes back?" "How am I supposed to explain it?" Arthur replied seriously. "Explain what?" "Leo is my son. I'm never going back to that house in the country. Don't worry, I've been given a second chance at life. For the next few decades, I will absolutely give you and Leo the best life possible." After saying that, the two walked into the house with their arms around each other. Soon after, the melodious sound of a piano drifted from the house, along with the joyful laughter of a family of three. When they were younger, Arthur always claimed that he used 2/3 of his salary to help struggling colleagues and poor students afford school. Because of that, he had a good reputation as a kind-hearted and compassionate man. Their whole family had to rely solely on Mary's meager wages and the remaining 1/3 of his salary to eke out a difficult living day by day. But little did she know, Arthur had been giving all that money to his mistress in the city and their illegitimate child. "Mom, why is Dad with them? Who are they anyway?" William tugged at Mary's hand. Only then did she snap out of her daze, her palms icy cold. "They are the woman your father loves and the child he had with her," she replied. The moment Mary revealed the truth, William's expression looked as if the sky had fallen. The image of the great, educated, and responsible father in the eldest son's heart was destined to shatter completely. It turned out that it wasn't that his father didn't want him anymore. It was that, from the very beginning, his father had never truly wanted him at all. Mary grasped William's hand. With tears streaming down her face, she led him away from the apartment complex. Along the way, their crying inevitably caught the attention of quite a few people. A kind-hearted woman carrying a basket of groceries walked by and stopped them. "Are you looking for someone, honey, or did something happen? Why are you crying so hard?" At that moment, William completely forgot the rule about not letting outsiders know about the bad things in the house. "Ma'am, my dad doesn't want me and my mom anymore." Mary pretended to be both conflicted and devastated as she uttered a few words. "My husband is utterly shameless. He swept the house clean of all our money, told me not to ruin his life, and said the kids were my problem to deal with. Then he came to the city alone to find another woman. An acquaintance from our hometown said they saw him come here, so my son and I came looking for him. Who would have thought we'd see with our own eyes that he already had a child with someone else?" As Mary finished speaking, a few neighbors who had been eavesdropping slowly gathered around. The kind-hearted woman's expression was one of utter shock. She tried her best not to look over at William's tear-stained face. This boy looked too similar, truly too similar to the kid inside the yard. The people around them also exchanged skeptical and knowing glances. Right at that moment, Mary pulled William away to leave. The woman couldn't help but ask, "Honey, where are you two going?" Mary replied bluntly, "To report him to his workplace, of course. His child with that woman is almost as old as my eldest son. He's been hiding it from me for years. A family in the city and a family in the country. He must want to be a landlord, holding one woman in each arm." The kind-hearted woman and the surrounding crowd immediately looked as if they had a sudden realization. No one tried to stop them anymore. Mary knew that from the moment she and her son walked out of that teacher's housing complex, public opinion would become a wild beast, gnawing Arthur, Emma, and their illegitimate child down to the bone. This was because Emma also had a husband. That man was the famous old principal of that very teacher's complex. In her past life, Mary had always known Emma's name. It wasn't just because she was the famous local beauty from the neighboring village, but also because, in the 1980s, she had done something absolutely scandalous. During the 80s, a wave of country folk moving to the city to make a living swept through the rural areas. Emma, coming from the countryside, was introduced to work as a nanny for a retired teacher couple. Not long after she started working there, the old woman of the house suddenly died of a heart attack. Less than a few months after his wife passed away, the old man registered his marriage with his young nanny. Living under the same roof with Emma day in and day out, how could his children, who lived elsewhere, possibly accept this? The moment they returned home, They cut ties with their father. But the old man, disregarding all the gossip and backlash, stubbornly insisted on being with Emma. Less than half a year after they got married, Emma smoothly gave birth to a baby boy in the hospital. That incident caused a massive uproar that year. Even Mary, living in the country, had heard countless people gossiping about it. Treating it as a bizarre piece of news, she had gone home and told Arthur. Who would have expected his face to instantly darken as he scolded her? It's one thing that you're normally stupid, but now you're learning from others to jump to conclusions based on rumors? Are you making up stories to badmouth people behind their backs now? Taking advantage of the opportunity, Arthur had berated her severely, causing her image in her children's eyes to plummet. But what was the truth? Emma and Arthur had been secretly involved with each other for a long time. Emma had deceived the old teacher, to the point that his own family turned their backs on him, all so he could raise her child. Arthur dared to do the deed, but didn't dare to take responsibility, and he even forbade Mary from insulting the woman he loved. They truly were a match made in hell. In the city, Mary still had one relative she could rely on. That was her cousin, David. In the early 80s, the winds of economic reform had blown into the city. Her cousin came to the city to do business and struck it rich in just a few years. He then brought his wife and children to the city to enjoy a good life, earning the admiration of everyone in the village. Once, Mary had casually mentioned this at home. Arthur immediately expressed his contempt. "Typical nouveau rich," he sneered. "Gold chains, gold watches, all he's missing are gold-plated teeth. He reeks of money, I can't believe you admire that." From then on, Mary never brought up her cousin's family again. But now, when Mary and William showed up at the door of her cousin's restaurant, he was stunned at first. Upon seeing the tear stains on both of their faces, he immediately asked in a worried tone, "Mary, what's wrong?" "Who bullied you two?" David asked. Mary briefly explained everything. Her cousin's wife, Sarah, had initially been a bit impatient upon seeing them, but after hearing the story, she planted her hands on her hips, stomped her foot, and immediately started cursing. How much money does Arthur even make a month? Yet he can afford to support a house in the city and buy a piano? No wonder he swept your house clean of every last penny. Turns out it was to raise another woman and her child. Mary, just how miserably have you and those 3 kids been living in the country? Sarah's scolding truly hit a sore spot. William's face looked even worse than usual. Arthur had always valued him the most. He constantly told William that as the eldest son, he would have to shoulder the family's responsibilities and study hard to continue the family's scholarly reputation. And the result? Arthur's illegitimate child lived in a spacious, brightly lit courtyard house in the city. There was a piano in the house for him to play in his free time, along with afternoon tea and pastries. As for William, he had to squeeze onto a creaky old wooden bed with his younger brother. In his free time, he could only play in the dirt. He had to study desperately to get perfect scores just to be rewarded with a single walnut cookie. The difference in treatment was like heaven and earth. William burst into tears. "Mom, did Dad never actually like me? Did he only like me because I look like that boy?" Mary was momentarily left speechless. David and Sarah didn't know how to comfort him either. Although the boy's deduction was a bit extreme, thinking about it carefully, it wasn't entirely impossible. Her expression as dark as thunder, Mary pulled him up. "Stop crying. It's not that your dad doesn't want us, it's that we don't want him anymore." The next day, Mary left William with Sarah and brought David, along with a few workers from his restaurant, to the teacher's housing complex. As soon as they arrived, the person who opened the door was the little boy. In a crisp, childish voice, he asked, "Who are you looking for?" David replied gruffly, "Looking for your dad." The boy tilted his head and actually asked, "Are you looking for my old dad or my handsome young dad?" Mary let out a cold laugh. "So how many dads do you actually have? Or should I ask, which dad do you like more?" The boy smiled innocently and adorably. "I like my handsome young dad more." "Leo, who are you talking to?" A gentle but vigilant female voice called out. The boy, completely inexperienced in the ways of the world, immediately swung the courtyard gate wide open. Mary saw the glamorous, well-dressed Emma. Emma also saw Mary, a woman whose skin had become rough from year-round hard labor. The little boy beside them still wouldn't let it go. "So which of my dads are you looking for?" Emma turned pale with fright. She lunged forward and hugged the child tightly to her chest. "Emma, Leo, what are you doing?" Arthur simply appeared just like that. Without needing to say another word, David grabbed Arthur by the shoulder and threw him hard onto the ground. The restaurant workers stormed into the yard. picking up every meticulously cared-for flower pot in the garden and smashing them to pieces. Emma, holding the child in her arms, trembled like a leaf in the autumn wind. Mary raised her hand and delivered a vicious slap. Caught completely off guard, Emma couldn't dodge in time and took the full brunt of it. The child immediately screamed, "You are bad people! Why are you hitting my mom and dad?" Mary looked at the tender face that resembled her eldest son's. Emma hugged the child tightly, looking ready to risk her life. "You've hit me, and you've vented your anger. Now take your people and get lost. If I scream, none of you will get away with this." Mary slapped her again, this time on the other side of her face. "Where is my money? Where are my food stamps? You married into the city and clung to an old man to raise your child, so how do you still have the audacity to take Arthur's money?" All year round, Arthur claimed his salary was used to help struggling colleagues and poor students, Mary continued. "Now I've seen it with my own eyes. Do you dare say he never spent a single dime on you and your son?" Meanwhile, on the other side of the yard, Arthur was also being thoroughly taught a lesson by David. Arthur seemed to have even had his front teeth knocked out. Half of his face was swollen, and air whistled through the gaps when he spoke. Mary, how did you find your way here?" David landed 2 more solid punches. Whack! Whack! "You motherfucker! You take all the money and food stamps from your house to feed another woman, and you still have the nerve to ask how we found you." After saying that, David yelled at Emma, "Where's the money? Give the money back." There were already a few neighbors eavesdropping outside the yard. Upon hearing this, the crowd forgot they were supposed to be just watching and began gossiping out loud. "I wondered how they dared to be so brazen," someone said. "Turns out this vixen wasn't just secretly cheating, she even made the guys support her." "That old principal brought this upon himself," another chimed in. "He's old, yet he insisted on marrying the young nanny. Who knows how his first wife actually died while living under the same roof with these two?" Mary deliberately let a mocking expression show on her face. Now Emma's scandalous affairs were known by everyone. Amidst the neighbors' whispered discussions, Emma, filled with both shame and anger, abruptly stood up. She grabbed a terracotta flower pot from behind her, and quick as a flash, smashed it squarely on Mary's head. Blood mixed with the smell of dirt trickled down as Mary fell backward. David rushed to catch her. Even Arthur, lying on the ground, panicked and screamed, "Emma, are you crazy?" Only then did Emma snap back to reality. Too many people had witnessed her attack someone, including her own son. The boy trembled as he called out, "Mom." Emma pulled her son back, intending to hide inside the house. However, the path was completely blocked by David's workers. She then hugged the child and tried to run toward the gate, but ended up crashing straight into a tall, sturdy old man carrying a bulging travel bag. He stood frozen at the entrance. The little boy burst into tears and ran toward the old man. "Old Dad, quickly, save Mom and my handsome young dad." The old man's face instantly turned bright red with rage, his entire body trembling violently. If several neighbors hadn't rushed forward to support him, he likely would have collapsed right then and there. The child continued to cry out, "Old Dad! Old Dad!" An annoyed neighbor shoved him hard. "Get lost." The boy fell heavily to the ground, crying incessantly. Mary felt a chilling coldness in her heart. In the 1980s, the idea of a wife's family bringing people to a cheating husband's door to beat up the mistress was extremely well supported by public opinion. Because Mary's head was smashed open, David and his men were not held responsible. Instead, they became witnesses. At the police station, David complained bitterly on behalf of Mary and the children, exaggerating everything tenfold. "Officers, didn't you see? We had several grown men standing right there, and my cousin still got smashed until she passed out. Just imagine how arrogant and ruthless this adulterous couple usually is." The scumbag Arthur, beaten until his face was bruised and swollen, clutched his head and pulled his hair in deep remorse. His dignity, his reputation, his job, his entire future was ruined. Completely finished. When the police came to take him away, he suddenly panicked. "I want to see my wife." Hearing this, David just wanted to keep beating him. "You still have the nerve to mention Mary? When you took all the money in the house and ran away, did you hit her? She was unconscious at home for a whole day and night, and now she's been smashed into the hospital by Emma. Who knows if she'll even wake up? If she doesn't, you two are murderers." Arthur looked as if he had been struck by lightning. His legs went weak, and with a heavy thud, he fell to his knees in front of David. Unable to hold back any longer, David kicked him hard in the chest. "You only know how to kneel when someone's about to die? Kneel my ass!" The police made a token effort to pull him away, letting David land a few more kicks and punches. Mary pretended to be unconscious in the hospital for several days. When William heard from David that Mary had been beaten like this by Arthur and Emma, the little boy was filled with both terror and hatred. "I just want Mom to wake up. Mom, Mom, please don't leave me." While Mary pretended to be in a coma, William helped wipe her face and hands. He also brought a small chair to sit next to the bed and told her stories. There were times when she almost couldn't keep up the act, but she had to push through. In their past life, the image of Arthur, the man who taught William how to read and write, who recounted the glorious history of their family, was ingrained far too deeply in the boy's heart. Amidst a village full of people, with mud on their legs and dirt on their hands, Arthur always carried the arrogant air of a fallen aristocrat. In that era of scarcity, people lacked education and imagination, so they were naturally captivated by things they had never seen and moved by his vivid descriptions. In his previous life, William had held immense respect for his father. From which college to apply to, what major to study, to what kind of wife to marry, he had listened to Arthur's advice on everything. Every major crossroads in his life had been guided by that father. Mary feared that after divorcing Arthur, as time passed, her eldest son would eventually forgive him. Since she was someone who had already died once, she didn't dare to take that gamble in this life. After letting William taste what it felt like to be a motherless child, fragile and adrift like a blade of grass, for a few days, she woke up. Hearing the news, David and Sarah rushed to the hospital immediately, bringing William along with them. William hugged her tightly, his face covered in tears, as if he had just found a precious lost treasure. Mary also hugged her son tightly. No matter how the world changed, how could she not love her own child? When the doctor came to examine her, she overheard David and Sarah whispering out in the hallway. That was when she learned that Arthur and Emma had been detained. With one look at that child, it was obvious he was Arthur's biological son. The old principal had lost all his dignity and initially couldn't bear to continue raising the boy. However, the little boy stayed by his bedside, calling out, "Old Dad," over and over again. It seemed the old man softened, and coupled with the fact that none of his own biological children were taking care of him, he ultimately kept the boy and even hired a private caretaker for him. David scoffed with contempt upon hearing this. Who would have thought? That old geezer still wants to raise Arthur's kid. Sarah let out a cold laugh. Intellectuals, my foot. Old or young, aren't they all just obsessed with that kind of thing? Mary recalled the encounter with Emma at the cemetery in her past life. Back then, Mary was old and haggard, wearing rough clothes, her face covered in wrinkles. Emma, on the other hand, was dressed in designer brands from head to toe, exuding an air of nobility and grace that placed her far above others. That was because for their entire lives, she and her son hadn't just spent the inheritance from that old man, they had also spent the shared assets of Mary, Anna, and Arthur. That illegitimate child was also a beneficiary. Having been given a second chance at life, was she supposed to let him grow up in luxury just because he was still young, but only to wait for the day he returned to take revenge on her and her children? Therefore, she had sent photos of Arthur and William, along with a photo of the illegitimate child, enclosed in a letter. She mailed everything to the old principal's biological children, who lived elsewhere. As a result, just a few days after the letter was sent, Mary and William were taking a walk on the hospital lawn when they heard a furious argument erupting from the window of a nearby inpatient ward. The floor wasn't high. Mary could even clearly see a middle-aged woman wearing thick glasses screaming at the white-haired old man in the hospital room. "How exactly did my mother die? Wasn't she killed by you and that nanny? I used to think you were just senile in your old age, but I never expected you to be this heartless and ungrateful. Your wife dies of unknown causes and you don't investigate, yet you have the heart and soul to go raise someone else's bastard child." Immediately after, there was the sound of shattering glass. Amidst the chaotic sounds of children crying and people trying to intervene, William clung closely to Mary's side without letting go. Mom, don't be afraid. I'm here." Mary rubbed his head gently. Mom isn't afraid. She had long since stopped being afraid of anything. From now on, the only ones who would have to suffer were Arthur's family of 3. The old principal's children wanted to drag the boy out of the hospital. The child, who had been excessively spoiled by Emma since birth, rolled around on the hospital room floor, throwing a tantrum. "I'm not going. I want old Dad to chase all of you away." The old principal's eldest daughter grabbed him directly and dragged him right in front of her father's hospital bed. "What, old Dad and handsome young Dad? I'm beating a shameless little bastard like you. At this point, wanting only to protect himself, the old principal could only close his eyes and pretend not to see. Afterward, they had someone send the boy back to Emma's maternal hometown. According to the laws of that era, Arthur and Emma certainly couldn't escape the charge of hooliganism, not to mention the additional charge of intentional assault. Originally, Emma's crime was a bit heavier than Arthur's, but upon hearing that the old principal, even while hospitalized, was still asking people to look after Emma in her dark jail cell, his children were driven utterly mad with anger. They directly reported it to the police, demanding a reinvestigation into the case of their biological mother, Mrs. Clark, who they believed might have been murdered. At the same time, they began to settle the score regarding Emma embezzling their family's assets. The whole affair caused an uproar everywhere. However, the case was turned upside down and investigated repeatedly, and the final conclusion was that Mrs. Clark had indeed died from an accident. It was just that, at the time she had her attack and was thrashing in pain, the old principal had snuck into the young nanny Emma's room. He was hiding under the covers, teaching her foreign languages, which was why they had missed the critical window for emergency rescue. After the truth was exposed, the old principal couldn't bear the contemptuous and disdainful looks from everyone in the hospital. On a stormy night, he went up to the hospital's old building by himself and jumped off. His children held a hasty funeral. Afterward, they stormed over to Emma's maternal hometown to make trouble. The largest and most beautiful courtyard house in the village was Emma's family's new home. Emma's family adamantly denied ever receiving money from anyone. Emma's mother even held her head high and told everyone, "The principal is my son-in-law. You younger generations still have to call me grandma when you see me." Knowing they had encountered such thick-skinned, shameless people, the old principal's children secretly hired a gang of street thugs. While Emma's entire family was away, the thugs smashed massive holes in several walls of the new house, not even sparing the load-bearing walls. Looking at their new house, which was now drafty from all four sides, Emma's family was so furious they cursed the heavens and the earth. They wanted to go find the culprits to settle the score. But the old principal's children had long since returned to their own city. Even if they wanted to find them, they couldn't. While the old principal's children were dealing with Emma, Mary divorced Arthur while he was in prison. He would probably have to wait until the crime of hooliganism was abolished from the law before he had a chance to get out. He constantly wanted to see Mary, just to confirm one thing. He had clearly just been reborn, yet before he could even enjoy a life with both a wife and a mistress, why had he ended up with this fate? Why else? Besides the fact that God had opened his eyes and allowed Mary to be reborn as well, wasn't it because he was too impatient? He felt he had endured humiliation his entire life, so the moment he became young again, he swept up all the money in the house and ran away, even knocking her unconscious. Once in the city, he didn't even bother to hide. He openly and brazenly moved into the old principal's house. How hard could it have been for Mary to catch them red-handed? But she felt that what he was most anxious about was probably something else. The small box of gold hidden in the brick crevice of the chicken coop. Honestly, she should have figured it out a long time ago. Arthur always considered himself noble and never took the initiative to do any household chores. So why, before they got married, had he built such an exquisite chicken coop with his own hands? He even took care of the chickens himself every day. After William was born, Arthur went to the coop every single day to collect eggs to nourish his son. In the past, Mary had always thought that while he treated her terribly, he at least genuinely loved their child. Only now did she realize that all those seemingly good deeds had been driven by his own hidden agenda from the very beginning. From beginning to end, Arthur had never been a decent person. Fortunately, in this life, she had directly sent him and Emma to prison. Afterward, Mary took that small box of gold and went on to live her life with her 3 children. Their days were truly incredibly comfortable. But one day, the moment Mary opened her front door, she saw Emma's mother and that illegitimate child standing right in front of it, their faces full of aggressive and miserable expressions. "Are beggars actually coming right to my doorstep now?" she thought. Emma's mother shoved the little boy, whose clothes were tattered and face streaked with dirt, right in front of Mary. "Leo is the child of my daughter and Arthur. You are Arthur's wife, so you figure out how to take care of this kid." After saying that, she tried to turn around and leave, but Mary grabbed her right back. "What kind of delusional nonsense are you spouting in broad daylight?" Mary demanded. "You casually drag a kid over here, claim he's Arthur's son, and force me to raise him. Why don't you just say, I gave birth to you while you're at it, so I can raise you too? Hearing the commotion, the neighborhood auntie opened her door. She took one look at Mary and immediately shouted loudly to call the villagers over to watch. Everyone, come quick! Emma's mother is here. Within seconds, the aunts and uncles of the village eagerly charged into the battlefield. This is the mother of Emma, that woman who got arrested for hooliganism, right? Well, this is certainly an eye-opener. As long as a man has a wife, whether he's old or young, your daughter wants to snatch him. Her rotten reputation has spread everywhere, yet you still have the nerve to come here and cause trouble? Your daughter just got arrested, and you dare to bring your grandson here to humiliate Mary? Your daughter has no shame, but you as a mother are even more shameless. Faced with a sky full of spit and curses, Emma's mother didn't panic at all. Leo is Arthur's child. If we followed the old rules, what's wrong with a man bringing a child he had on the outside back for his first wife to raise? Mary aggressively spat on the ground. The country has been established for so many years, yet your family's mindset still hasn't been reformed enough. No wonder Emma was thick-skinned enough to work as a nanny and then crawl under the covers to teach foreign languages to her boss. You're quite vicious yourself. You used the money from selling your daughter to build a new house, and now you won't even raise your own biological grandson. Emma's mother's face looked slightly ugly for a moment, but her guilty conscience lasted exactly 1 second before she immediately lifted her chin and argued back unreasonably. It's because you couldn't keep your man. What use are you? Anyway, this kid is Arthur's son, so it's only right to leave him at Arthur's house. Inside the house, William heard his mother being bullied. He immediately grabbed the newly finalized divorce papers, held them out in front of everyone, and shouted loudly, "You old monster, stop bullying my mom! It's not that my dad doesn't want us. It's that my mom and I don't want him anymore." Mary took the divorce papers and held them up for everyone to see. Emma's mother froze, and even the aunts and uncles in the village were utterly shocked. In the 1980s, divorce was truly something that shattered the conventional understanding of many people. But Mary had prepared her words long in advance. My parents-in-law passed away a long time ago. In the past, Arthur received quite a bit of help from the folks in this village. But he always believed that because his ancestors were once wealthy, and he himself was an intellectual, he could be arrogant and smug. Not only did he never contribute anything to the village, but in his heart, he always looked down on the very people who had helped him. For so many years, all the household expenses and the upbringing of our 3 children were almost entirely shouldered by me alone, Mary said. He always claimed his money was used for charity to help the poor, but in reality he spent it on that woman and his illegitimate child in the city. Now that he's been convicted of hooliganism, my children and I have lost all our face. Doesn't that also drag down the reputation of our village? That kind of man, that kind of husband. Mary looked down at William, who continued to choke back tears. That kind of father, I truly don't need anymore. The aunts and uncles looked at one another. After a few seconds of hesitation and thought, they immediately stood in front of Mary, shielding her behind them. A man who sneaks around and brings such shame to the whole village. If it were me, I'd dump him too. Emma's mother, if you're so capable, go to the prison and find Arthur to take responsibility. Do you think the people of this village are easy to bully? And what's this about old rules? I see you don't even have the rules for being a decent human being anymore. You only have the rules for creating bad karma. With everyone taking turns scolding her, Emma's mother was forced to step back. William shot a glare at Leo. The humiliation and fury of being deceived by the father he had once respected instantly flared up. He stepped forward and shoved Leo hard, sending him tumbling. You have an old dad and a handsome young dad. Who knows how many other dads you have? And you still have the audacity to want my mom to raise you? You really are shameless. Leo, who was already bewildered by the scolding, could only rub his eyes and cry loudly in utter grievance. Seeing more and more villagers gathering and the aunts and uncles' anger growing ever larger, Emma's mother pointed her finger, trembling. You people are using your numbers to bully the weak. Refusing to raise a child is creating bad karma. You'll be struck by lightning. By sheer coincidence, the weather at that moment was stiflingly hot, and dark clouds completely covered the sky. Right above everyone's heads, a sudden, deep rumble of thunder echoed. Everyone fell silent for a brief moment. William shouted loudly at the grandmother and grandson, "You're the bad person. You're the one who deserves to be struck by lightning." Emma's mother immediately began to tremble violently. and Leo cried even louder. Mary let out a cold laugh. If you want Arthur's family to take responsibility, then go to his family's ancestral graves and kowtow. Who knows, Arthur's parents might just be waiting to see the bastard grandson he fathered on the outside. Accompanied by the sound of a dog barking from someone's house, the tense atmosphere was pushed to its absolute breaking point. Emma's mother turned and fled. Leo ran after her, crying the whole way. The grandmother and grandson looked as if they were terrified that, if they were even a second too slow, they would be ganged up on and beaten by the whole village. The incident of Emma's family coming to cause trouble, ironically, gave Mary a perfectly justifiable excuse to move her children to the city. Everyone in the village knew about her situation of being harassed by Emma's family. Coupled with the fact that her cousin, David, was doing business in the city, the paperwork and procedures to move to the city went incredibly smoothly. While at it, Mary also changed the names of all 3 children so they would take her maiden last name. William asked, "Mom, why do we have to change our names? Are the bad people going to keep coming to find us and bully us?" Mary didn't answer directly. She just smiled and asked back, "Are the new names not nice?" The old names Arthur had given the children carried his heavy expectations for them to build and prosper his family's legacy. The meaning was all too obvious. As for Mary, she changed their last names to her maiden name, Miller, and gave them new middle names meaning joy, gladness, and bliss. As her children, they only needed to be healthy and happy. That was enough. Before they hit the road, the neighborhood auntie even helped her catch wind of a piece of news. Emma's mother was truly wicked to the core. Because she didn't want to keep Leo by her side, she had drugged the little boy, intending to secretly abandon or sell him. As a result, halfway there, the boy woke up and began thrashing around on her back. She had tied him to a baby carrier, and because he struggled so violently, the grandmother and grandson both tumbled down a steep ravine. It was only a few days later that they were discovered. The old woman was dead, and as for the boy, both of his legs were broken. He might not be able to walk again in the future. It truly was a case of reaping what one sows. Hearing this, Mary didn't know what to say. She only sighed heavily. Everyone has their own destiny. With such a tragedy happening to Emma's family, who knew if they would hold a grudge and come back to cause trouble? Her children were still young, and she truly couldn't bear any more threats. The neighborhood auntie had originally thought that sharing such satisfying news would make Mary happy, never expecting it would make her even more worried about the dark side of human nature. In the end, the auntie could only say to the children, "Once you get to the city, you must take good care of your mother. Be good and listen to her, okay?" The little ones all nodded obediently. On the bus ride to the city, James suddenly asked, "Mom, we're going to the city to live a better life, right?" Mary looked into the expectant eyes of her children. "That's right. From now on, our family is going to have wonderful days ahead." After moving to the city, William became a genius painter. James wasn't cut out for studying. When he reached his teenage years, he went to his Uncle David's restaurant to help out. He persevered bit by bit, starting from the very bottom. Mary went into business with David and Sarah, becoming as close as a single family. Her cousin's restaurant became increasingly prosperous. They registered the brand Miller Family Garden, established a company, and gradually expanded the business even further. Right at that time, the youngest daughter, Lily, who was the best student in the family, got accepted into a top university. Their whole family and the company moved down south to live. Later on, David and Sarah's children didn't want to inherit the family business and went abroad one by one to develop their own careers. David handed over the domestic management rights to James, while he and his wife decided to go overseas to live with their children. They said it was for retirement, but David was never one to sit still. A few years later, they opened another Miller Family Garden in a Chinatown abroad. Over 10 more years passed. William's paintings were sold for astronomical prices in Sea City, news that sent shockwaves through the entire industry. A few people caught the scent of profit and came knocking at their door. That day, the housekeeper, Martha, let an old repairman in to fix the drainage pipe in the kitchen. As they passed through the living room, the repairman suddenly stopped dead in his tracks and refused to walk any further. "Mary." Mary raised her head. The worker in the uniform had dark tanned skin and was thin and unkempt. His face was so weathered that it was very difficult to recognize him as the acquaintance from years ago. Only those eyes, filled to the brim with resentment, made her realize that the person standing in front of her was none other than Arthur, whom she hadn't seen in many years. He looked her up and down, then raised his head to scan the luxurious villa. Damn you, you ruined me, made me sit in prison for all those years, and then completely disappeared with the kids. Do you have any idea how I've been living all these years? Tell me right now. That box of gold the family hid back then, did you take it? At this moment, Arthur no longer had even a trace of the noble, arrogant demeanor of the intellectual he used to be. It was obvious that he was just a thug at the bottom of society, ground down by life until he was full of hostility. Seeing this, Martha, the housekeeper, immediately blocked his path, standing in front of Mary. "Stay right there," she shouted loudly. But Arthur refused to listen. He lunged forward, intending to hit Mary. As a result, Martha delivered a swift kick, locked his arm, and pinned him directly to the floor of the villa, forcing him to his knees. Now, all he could do was cry out in pain. Martha was no ordinary housekeeper. She was a former boxing champion who had retired from the military. The villa complex's security guards quickly rushed over, and Mary called the police. But before Arthur was escorted away, her children had just arrived home. Whether it was a coincidence or fate, today happened to be the day of their weekly family gathering. No matter how busy they were, the children would always come back to visit her. As a result, Arthur got the unearned privilege of seeing all three of the children Mary had poured her heart into raising. All grown up, successful, and each with their own remarkable achievements. Outstanding in his field, the eldest son, William, walked quickly to Mary's side with a striking aura. Arthur's eyes immediately lit up. In their previous life, his favorite had always been William. He had poured all his effort into the boy's education, got him into a prestigious university, and pushed him to join a government agency. William had climbed the ranks step by step to a highly ideal position, not only reviving his father's family's reputation but also bringing great honor to their ancestors. That had been Arthur's greatest pride in their past life. But at this moment, William didn't even bother to give him a single glance. He only focused on Mary, asking anxiously, "Mom, what happened in the house?" "William, look at Dad, I'm your dad," Arthur cried out. William frowned and shot him an ice-cold glare that made Arthur's body stiffen. "I don't recall having a father," he said coldly. Before Arthur could even argue back, the front doors opened. The second son, James, dressed in a sharp suit, walked in alongside the youngest daughter, Lily, who was wearing professional office attire. "Wow, there really are some thick-skinned people out there, rushing to someone's door to claim to be their father," James mocked. "Let me see what a shameless piece of trash looks like." Arthur's face turned livid with anger. "When you were born that year, I should have drowned you. Smack. James spun around and delivered a resounding slap straight to his face. "I'll beat you to death, you bastard." James was the child Arthur had hated the most, for no other reason than he didn't resemble him and had a temperament very similar to Mary's cousin, David. A nephew taking after his uncle was nothing unusual, but Arthur had always taken the disparity in circumstances between himself and David, twisted it into resentment, and vented it all on the boy. From a young age, if Arthur wasn't beating him, he was scolding him, causing the boy to drop out of school very early. He had entered society far too young, and the more he lived, the more practical and street-smart he became. Their father-son relationship only worsened. In truth, the tragedy of their family being torn apart in their previous life over that small box of gold was largely the karma Arthur had sown among his own children. He understood James's temperament, which was why, right before he died, he had deliberately spoken privately with William multiple times. This ensured that when the family fractured, James made the biggest fuss, constantly suspecting William of secretly swallowing the gold. But in this life, the person to slap his face the fastest was the very son he despised the most. Standing to the side, Lily pushed up her glasses and reminded her brother, "A few hits are enough. If you leave a visible injury, it'll be hard to explain to the police." Arthur was beaten until he was dizzy and seeing stars. Only then did he get a clear look at his youngest daughter's face. "You're Lily? But Lily had long since forgotten who Arthur was. It was just that, toward the terrible things this father had done in the past, she felt a genuine, deep-seated disgust. "You are a suspect for intentional trespassing and assault. I am the lawyer representing the Miller family and filing a lawsuit against you. Don't worry, whatever punishment you deserve, you won't miss a single one." Arthur's eyes widened. How could he have ever expected that the youngest daughter, whom he had always neglected in their previous life and carelessly married off when she came of age, would now become such a strong, sharp lawyer? She even had the imposing presence to talk back to him. "Kids, do you all really not remember me? I'm your dad." James was the first to let out a mocking laugh. "You really are thick-skinned. You say you're my dad, but do you even know my name? Arthur blurted out. Your name is James. Your name carries my family's legacy. James cursed right in his face. Bullshit. My name is James Gladness Miller. Gladness as in joy and happiness. Do you know the biggest restaurant brand in the city, Miller Family Garden? Chairman David Miller is my uncle. The founding shareholder, Mary Miller, is my biological mother. You don't know shit, yet you dare come here claiming to be my father? The more you talk, the more I want to beat you. William stopped his younger brother and spoke slowly. James is now the CEO of Miller Family Garden. If he hadn't started serving tea, working the cash register, and managing things at the restaurant since middle school, Miller Family Garden wouldn't have grown to have branches all over the country like it does today. Arthur looked at his two sons with emotion. I haven't been here all these years. You kids have suffered. It's all because of her, Mary. Even at a time like this, he still wanted to direct all the blame toward Mary. Louis let out a cold laugh. Do you want to add slander and defamation to your charges? Arthur choked on his words. She continued. I am a lawyer, my oldest brother is a painter, and my second brother is a businessman. Every one of our successes is inseparable from our biological mother's sacrifices and support. Back then, that scumbag father of ours swept up all the money in the house and ran away. He even abused my mother until she was unconscious for a whole day and night. He never thought about us even once. When he got to the city, he used our family's savings and money of unknown origin to buy things for his mistress and illegitimate child. If my mother hadn't woken up in time, who knows if the three of us siblings would have even lived to adulthood. After hearing his youngest daughter speak, Arthur glared at Mary with wide eyes and screamed, Mary, why didn't you let William take the civil service exam? Only by becoming a government official can our family's legacy be revived. You have destroyed my entire family line. After all this time, the thing Arthur cared about the most was the fact that she hadn't let William become a government official. William instantly dropped his usual gentle demeanor and scolded him coldly. The despicable one is you. Back then, when I was standing outside that garden, I heard every single word clearly. You originally planned to abandon my mother and us, preparing to take your mistress, an illegitimate child, to lay your cards on the table with the old principal. What right do you have now to take another step into the Miller family's home? Having everything exposed by his most beloved son, Arthur looked as if he had completely collapsed. After all, he had lived a life of luxury in his previous life. In this life, however, he had fallen into a miserable, wandering existence, suffering all kinds of torment, surviving until today solely supported by the beautiful memories of his past life. Now, his children were standing right in front of him, but every single one of them looked at him as if looking at a criminal. How could he possibly bear it? When Arthur was led away by the police, his eyes remained glued to Mary. As for her, she didn't say a single word from beginning to end. Her children had already said everything she wanted to say on her behalf. And as for the truth he so desperately wanted to know, she was even less willing to let him find out. In this life, not only had she personally sent him and Emma to prison, but she had also pulled all of her children back to her side, just so he could see with his own eyes how lovingly, harmoniously, gloriously, and happily she and her children lived. Afterward, the children stayed behind to discuss how to deal with Arthur in the future. The youngest daughter said that this man would at most be detained for a few days. Once he was released, she was afraid he would continue to harass their mother. James snorted coldly. What's the big deal? I'll just hire a few guys to take care of him, and that'll be that. William shook his head. Don't do anything reckless. How could someone who's been in prison for so many years give up so easily? I have an opportunity to teach at a university in Country M. At worst, Mom can move there to live with me. Could he really chase us all the way to Country M? Mary smiled faintly. There's no need to go to so much trouble. He spent years in prison and then struggled at the bottom of society. For all these years, we changed our names and moved down south to live, yet he still managed to find us. That proves God intentionally sent him to meet us. Since that's the case, we shouldn't let God down. The children fell silent. They looked at each other, exchanging subtle glances. Mary spoke frankly. Back then, he abandoned everything to run off and reunite with that mother and son. Now, all they needed to do was send him back to them. This matter was ultimately handled by James. After Arthur was released from the detention center, he happened to come across a labor recruiter offering incredibly lenient conditions. An old, weak ex-convict like him simply had no ability to refuse. So Arthur got into the small truck heading to the workplace. Blindfolded, gagged, and with his hands and feet bound, Arthur was scared half to death. But upon arrival they untied him and threw him directly out of the vehicle. Only then did he realize he had been brought back to his old hometown. Years ago, after serving his prison sentence, he had returned here once. But the old house had collapsed long ago, and many of the villagers had moved away. Aside from a few elders who still remembered him, none of the young people had any idea who he was. What drove him to the utmost despair was that the small box of gold hidden in the chicken coop had disappeared. Whether it had been taken by Mary or someone else, he had absolutely no way of finding out. This time, upon returning to his hometown, he had barely reached the start of the road when he bumped into an old man from the village, someone Mary had arranged for in advance. The old man pretended to enthusiastically recognize him, then led him to an old, dilapidated, tile-roofed house. Arthur couldn't for the life of him figure out why the man had brought him there, until the door opened. Standing inside was a white-haired old woman, Emma. Inside the dark house, there was also a crippled middle-aged man leaning on a crutch, his body visibly twisted and deformed. The three of them faced one another. The silence in the room was terrifying. The first to react was Emma. She lunged forward and grabbed Arthur tightly. "You God-forsaken bastard! You've been out of prison for so many years and only now do you decide to come back?" Arthur instinctively tried to break free, but Emma gripped him even tighter. "I went to prison because of you. By the time I got out, my entire family was dead. And what about our son, Leo? Do you have any conscience left? Why wouldn't you come looking for us?" Did Arthur really not know about what had happened to Emma and her son? Of course he knew. Otherwise, why would he refuse to return to his hometown during all those years wandering out in the world? First, he suspected that Mary had discovered the small box of gold and fled with the children and the money, so he was unwilling to accept it. Second, wasn't it because he simply didn't dare face Emma and her son, refusing to shoulder the responsibility? James had donated money to build a school and a clinic for their hometown, and had even opened a supply chain for local agricultural products. He had truly brought benefits back to his roots. Therefore, now that Arthur had returned to the village, there was no way he would ever be allowed to leave again. In their previous life, hadn't Emma stood in front of the tombstone and said that they couldn't be together for their entire lives? It was fine. In this life, as long as they lived to be 100, they would be able to stay by each other's side for a very, very long time. Murder only takes a single thrust of a knife. As for Mary, she wanted to use the cruelty of reality, the heaven and earth disparity between his two sets of children, to crush Arthur's already rotten heart, little by little. Arthur's conscience had vanished long ago. To be ruthless, Mary learning that from him wasn't difficult at all. After dealing with Arthur's situation, one morning, Mary suddenly felt incredibly dizzy upon waking up. Martha insisted on taking her to the hospital. In less than half a day, all three children had dropped all their personal work and rushed to her bedside. Mom, are you okay? How are you feeling? Do you need us to do anything?" Each of their calls sounded so much like that time when she had first been reborn, when three tiny children surrounded her bed, begging her to wake up. Through these 30-something years of this life, Mary had lived very contentedly and completely fulfilled. "William, I am so happy that I let you develop freely," Mary said. "In the end, you chose the painting you loved and became a famous artist. James, I know you are free-spirited and love your independence. I am so proud that the Miller family entrusted the business into your hands. Lily, I know that what you wanted most was to prove yourself, to make everyone see your brilliance. No one will ever look down on you or ignore you just because you are a woman anymore. You truly did it. I am so happy for you." Her three children, who had already entered middle age, burst into tears in front of her. Martha walked in holding the test results and clicked her tongue a couple of times. "Director Miller just had a drop in her blood sugar. What older person doesn't have a few minor ailments? What are you all crying for? It brings bad luck." The three of them hurriedly snatched the test results to examine them closely. James let out a heavy sigh of relief. "Mom, you scared me half to death. I thought you didn't want us anymore." Lily leaned down and embraced Mary. William smiled bitterly. "Mom, if something were to happen to you, no matter how successful I become, what meaning would any of it have?" Mary shook her head gently. "You are your own person. You are not an extension of anyone else, and you don't need to be tied down by me in everything you do. That opportunity to go to Country M was a nomination from the Art Academy, so you should go. The world is vast and wide, with a free mind and your talents fully realized. William, you have truly turned life into poetry." William knelt beside Mary's hospital bed. Mom, how life turns into poetry isn't important. What is important is that you still have to be here. The end.
Now that's sweet karma. Arthur chased a fake fortune and lost it all, while Mary built her own empire from scratch. It just proves that walking away from toxicity is the ultimate win. Which payback moment was your favorite? Drop a comment below, hit subscribe, and see you in the next review.